Welcome into the Fort Verticals podcast here on this Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, from a somewhat chilly Jacksonville, Florida. Winter storm moved on. Clouds are still wet around, but it's still cold. And a lot of you along the Gulf Coast, the Florida Panhandle, southeastern Georgia, southern Alabama, New Orleans, places like that, saw some great photos of snow over there. First time at least in this meaningful snow since the storm of 1993. But in terms of numbers, the highest since the 1800s. And I wasn't around in 1993 or in the 1800s. So a lot of you folks to my north and west having a lot of fun. We didn't get any snow here in Jacksonville, at least in the area where I'm at. It was cold though, and saw some ice too, just a little bit of areas where there was some ice. But very, very cold yesterday and cold today. But then again, this time next week will be in the 70s. So what's up with that? If you're new here, welcome to the show. This is not a weather show, by the way. People will tie in the weather stuff as the weather from time to time. As a fan of atmospheric science, of course, we have tornado season going on. The heart of that will be starting in the spring. May weave in some of that to the show, but this is a college football show. Excuse me. This is also a Marvel and Star Wars show for you. So if you have stuff, news and whatnot, all of those been pretty quiet for the most part. There is some casting news from the Star Wars realm that I wasn't going to put in the show, but frankly, we weren't going to go for a whole hour. So I'll move that probably towards next week and next Tuesday. But I got some Marvel news to talk about and some Tampa Bay news. First, big Tampa Bay topic in a little bit. Excuse me. The cough is still around, but getting a little bit better. Got some implications, if you will, of Ohio State winning the national title, as happened on Monday night. And got some thoughts on this national title ratings controversy. What a controversy, just concern. I'll touch on that here first. If you're new here, welcome in to the show. We do, like I said, college football show twice a week, usually Monday or Tuesday, Thursdays. Now, we didn't do a show properly on Tuesday. We did it after the national championship on Monday night, somewhat early Tuesday morning. So I guess technically there was a Tuesday show, but no show in the afternoon on Tuesday. Then we have a show on Thursday, mostly. Of course, I'll let you guys know if the schedule has to change because of that. But usually Tuesday, Thursday, that's the schedule, at least going forward. Again, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe. We only have 4 subscribers right now. Make sure you subscribe, listening to this live right now by chance. There are some of you in the live chat that are listening to this live, I believe. I'll get to you guys in a moment. But if you are listening live, make sure you subscribed. If you're listening to this on the replay, playback, also make sure you subscribe. Listening to this on the podcast feed. I know we've been kind of slow on getting some of those episodes out. Just uploaded the Tuesday/Monday show. I'll get this one out as soon as I can. But of course, it's hard when it's just me wearing all the hats here. I'm literally the CCO, the CEO, my own HR person, and my own editor, director. I'm also the host of the show. So just a little bit of a little nugget there that I am a one-man person. It's a bit of a load to get this show out, but it's working out pretty far for the most part. So housekeeping out of the way, again, touch on national title ratings, concern, some of the implications for Ohio State winning a national title, mostly directed towards Michigan, but not just Michigan. Also, starting a new segment that we'll be doing. I don't know if we'll do the whole thing, but it's going to be predictions versus reality. Touch on that here in a little bit. Again, got some Doctor Strange not appearing in Doomsday. What's up with that? Which, by the way, we should start filming here relatively soon, I believe, within the next couple of months. And some Tampa Bay Buccaneers news that dropped yesterday. So again, if you're new here, welcome in. Again, make sure you do those things I just mentioned. And let's start out the show. So the national title happened on Monday. It happened. Ohio State won the national championship. Congratulations to Notre Dame for a great season. Ohio State winning it. Good for Ryan Day. Happy for him. And all those folks there were happy to get that sort of burden off their back. I know I went on a huge, pretty medium-sized tangent on Monday night / Tuesday morning about my own personal thoughts on the whole Ryan Day hot seat talk. Like, I thought that was kind of unwarranted, and still to this day, even on Twitter, I went on a little bit of a tirade yesterday or the day before. Kind of singled out some people, but I think rightfully so. Just for some of the hypocrisy and some of the This stuff doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. Just an example of the NFL types thinking they know about college football, but then again, they don't even really talk about it that much. Anyway, but heck, none of those people couldn't name, uh, USF's head coach, who was Alex Galesh, by the way. Probably don't know who he is. If you're some NFL person, like, who? Yeah, so kind of proves that point a little bit. Some stuff on Twitter this week. Yeah, be sure to follow me over there as well. Um, but the numbers came out for the national title game, as they per usually do after every single one. Much like most of these TV shows, like streaming shows, they usually have the Nielsen numbers and whatever internal data analytics that a lot of these big network streaming services like Disney, well, I guess like CBS, Paramount Plus, places like that, HBO Max, the like. They all have their own internal numbers and everything, so they release them to their investors and whatnot, and their stakeholders, people who probably never would ever see in real life, right? People who are faces and names, who have no idea who they are. They're given this internal data, seeing how numbers compare to last year's numbers and how they project in the future. It's stuff that may seem boring to you, which it is. It is boring. It's stuff that will probably bore, would probably not interest a person living in, I don't know, Jasper, Indiana, or Jasper, Alabama, maybe Lubbock, Texas, or places like that. Probably wouldn't care about ratings and stuff, but people were talking about it yesterday. A lot of big personalities, some I don't follow that much, some I do follow, were mentioning this. And the numbers that are coming in via several sources, and then just like one person talking about it. It's a lot of people. Ratings for the national title game: 22.1 million people tuned in. It's the third lowest of the playoff era in general. Though this is the 12-team playoff, so it's the very smallest sample size of what it'll look like next year. And granted, the format keeps on changing. We'll have a conversation to be had. But that number, 22.1, does that matter to you as a fan? Just it's a general question to start out here. Like I just mentioned, most people who are not in this, in the realm of like PR or communications like I am, because I got a degree in it, you probably have no idea about like data analytics, going and crunching numbers and looking at data tables and pie charts and doing all of this, data collection stuff, which is, by the way, quantitative data, not qualitative. Qualitative is more characteristics. This is more quantitative, numbers based, numerical numbers and stuff. Probably didn't need to know all of that, but there we go. Some free education there. But this number, 22.1. Again, what does this matter to you? Does this matter to you at all? Again, if you're living in Jasper, Indiana, Powell, Wyoming, Jasper, Alabama, Lubbock, Texas, doesn't matter to you. That 22.1 million people who tuned in. To those folks and most of the fans, it shouldn't matter to you because you're not a TV executive. You're not a public relations specialist. You're not a data analytics person. You're not someone who's looking for, again, thousands upon thousands of data numbers and analytics. And again, some stuff may bore you. Now, to me, that fascinates me. So it's a little bit different, a different realm here. But generally, should that matter to you? Should a 22.1 million number matter to you? Personally, to me, if I wasn't, taking me out of this whole, as someone who, again, has sort of dove into a lot of this data crunching numbers and looking at analytics and numerical data, and, audience engagement, stuff like that, which is, believe it or not, I've actually been privileged and in sitting on a lot of the same meetings, by the way, through several of my internships. A couple of them, I've had the privilege of doing that. I've actually seen what big company / organizational analytical data looks like. Audience engagement, audience retention, like to dislike ratio, how many views that a certain like post on Instagram get or a Twitter account get, or how much interaction have you been getting and how many followers you've been getting. Believe it or not, I've been privileged to actually be seeing those numbers, like meetings I've actually had the privilege of sitting into. So to the regular person, again, excluding me a little bit in terms of my actual life, that would be boring, and it should be boring because it doesn't matter to you. You're not a TV exec. You're not a data analytics person. More than likely, if you're listening to this, you don't care about it. But to the data analytics people like me and the PR people, communications people, TV execs, stakeholders, people who actually invest in some of these companies, particularly in this case, Disney, this should matter to you. 22.1, again, the third lowest of the total playoff era in general. So that's including the 14 model in this 1 year of the 12 team, and I guess next year being the last one or whatever. At this point, I don't really care anymore. It keeps on expanding. It's getting kind of hard to follow, but again, to the regular person, that 22.1 million number, that really shouldn't matter to you. Again, if you're just a regular fan who doesn't care about data analytics or numerical data or quantitative data, you don't care. This shouldn't matter to you. If you're a TV exec, if you are a influence, if you're someone who donates money, big money influencers, shareholders, stakeholders, this should matter to you, and it should. This is a low number, obviously. I mean, if you look at the numbers, I mean, it's kind of it is true. So that's out of the way. Yes, that did happen, and yes, if you're a regular fan, this shouldn't matter to you. But I know some of you who are of interest, like me, and who like to understand. Well, why is the number so low? 22.1. I mean, that's sure for a normal YouTube channel, that's a big number, right? That's like numbers that Mr. Beast gets. Get numbers like that, or if you're a real one, McJuggernuggets, when he used to do the psycho videos and stuff. Most of you don't even know who that is. Some of you do. Like those are the type of numbers that those big time YouTubers get. Like that's their total number of total views. If you ever go on to their about tab of their pages and you see the total amount of views those channels get, 22.1 million is the amount of numbers they get, or close to, or within the neighborhood. But for a TV network like ESPN or a company like Disney, that's not necessarily good enough. There's certainly probably a lot of trepidation, a lot of nervousness, a lot of scratching of the head. So again, you might be asking yourself, well, why is the number that low compared to some of the other games and whatnot? Why is the number the third lowest of the national championship games? A couple of reasons. Nothing to do with the brands. These are the two biggest brands in the country. In fact, I kind of agree with Kirk Herbstreit. These are Notre Dame football and Ohio State fan base wise. Those are the two biggest fan bases you could have wanted. That's what ESPN, frankly, was probably filming in the mouth in terms of trying to get these guys wanting these big brands in a national championship, and they went their way. Not that they have no, nefarious or powers that be that made this happen. I know there's been a lot of, big conspiracy theories on that, but it's just the way it worked out. And these are the two brands that I feel like a company like ESPN or Fox or CBS or Amazon or Netflix or hell, even me, would want that. Want those two brands. Heck, it's big enough that you have Shane Gillis, who's a frequent member of the Joe Rogan podcast or frequent guest, was on Pat McAfee this week, this week, and he was on during the playoffs when they were at South Bend. He was on game day as a guest picker. So you're drawing in a pretty big crowd. Not to mention the Ohio State fan base and the influence of alumni and former NFL players and folks who are big Ohio State fans are from the state of Ohio, regardless of where you're from, like Xenia, Cleveland, Cincinnati. Those are the two, again, biggest fan bases in the country. You also are involving one of the biggest conferences in the college football conferences in the world, but we're talking about the United States and the Big Ten. Of course, the SEC is obviously probably number one if you look at historical data, which is kind of including, of course, the Bama Saban stuff. But take that away too. That's they have a lot of national championships too over a number of decades. I mean, that's the most dominant conference of all of college football. Of course, a lot of it being headlined by Alabama, but you're involving the second biggest one being Ohio State. And you had it last year with Michigan, so back-to-back years of Big Ten representation in the championship. Well, I mean, technically, of course, with Washington retroactively, but I still have to say it wasn't the brands ever the issue. I think it has a lot to do with the calendar and the way this was marketed. Now, I think there are some things here that we can all agree with. Having the national championship on January 20th, of course, right in the middle of the NFL playoff race. And of course, every 4 years, we have what's called a presidential inauguration. And like I mentioned on Monday/Tuesday morning, early Tuesday morning, everyone was glued onto your TV, not mostly ESPN, but mostly to, CNN, CBS, MSNBC, CBS, PBS, C-SPAN. Mostly everyone, I'm pretty sure this is the case, mostly everyone in America, if you're able to get to a TV or a YouTube live stream, were watching the inauguration. And it just happened to be on the same day as the national championship game. And of course, that's a big, historical thing for the United States. Is a big deal. You're swearing in a U.S. president, regardless of what your party is. It's a big deal. So everyone's sort of glued to that. Not to mention, again, within the sports, we'll have exiting politics here for hopefully the last time. But of course, you also have NFL playoff reaction. That's what everyone was talking about. Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, Texans, games like that, where those were, the NFL rings kings. It brings in the most money, eyeballs, investors, whatnot. You know, um, of course, that didn't help. You also, just the fact that you had so much days in between the semifinals happening in the national championship, that big gap, if you will. It just in general, the schedule did not help. The schedule, the way it's currently set up, with the 12-team playoff, the way the schedule is formatted, having the national championship on January 20th, and again, every 4 years, it will unfortunately have to be in coinciding with a presidential inauguration. It just doesn't help out. And not to mention, too, ESPN's marketing. I mean, they did so much. I mean, they were airing commercials all over the place throughout all of their shows. But again, like I said, on a day like Monday, where you have, again, NFL reaction and, of course, it being an inauguration, not everyone's paying attention to that. There are, unfortunately, other real world things that are taking a value of that. Not to mention other more, I guess, like other sports that are higher in statue and value, being the NFL. So again, I think a lot of this has to do, unfortunately, the schedule. Again, having it on the same day as inauguration day, and everyone's sort of, again, glued to all these bigger news networks and not ESPN. That didn't help either. And not to mention, too, the game was not necessarily competitive, though. Of course, Notre Dame makes it somewhat competitive in the last 10 minutes or so. But for the most part, it's not really that competitive. That's not playoffs' fault. That's not ESPN's fault. That's not our fault. That's just how the game played out. Now, you can also make the argument on the flip side that it is the fault of the hires that be, not just ESPN, not just folks at Fox, that, or any other network, it doesn't matter who it was, that the schedule is what it is. Again, you have this huge gap between, of course, the semifinals and national championship, and not just that, the national championship being played on January 20th. Like, we're almost into the next month, into February. I mean, that's a long time. So, of course, there's the other arguments. Josh Pay brought it up on his show on Tuesday about, we just go over the pros and cons of the playoff, at least in the first iteration. And actually, in my opinion, it's not even one of the cons he brought up is the whole ESPN exclusivity thing, where he wishes, and I kind of agree with him, where it's more like the NFL, where you have different channels involved. You have maybe one, the semifinals, one game's on CBS, one game's on Fox, the other two maybe on ESPN or whatever, or maybe one game's on Amazon or Netflix. That, to me, that's not necessarily a reason why the ratings were low, but it could be a factor. Like, just the fact that it's on one network, not everyone, again, probably watches ESPN that much. Of course, it's, I don't know. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's not a factor, but just in general, I do agree with Josh Payne on that, though. That it would be nice to have these other networks involved instead of just having ESPN being like the driving force, and everyone, depending on your stance, either likes ESPN or doesn't like ESPN. That's why some folks probably didn't tune in, probably, maybe. But the big one, at least in my opinion, yes, it has to do with the schedule. The fact that, again, it was on inauguration day doesn't help either. Again, everyone was all glued to their TVs for the majority of the day. And then by the time the national championship comes on at 8 o'clock, everyone's TV'd out. You don't want to watch anything anymore. You just want to go do other stuff. And unless you're a college football sicko like me, you're watching it. If you're at the game, you're watching it, right? You're actually there. So it's a little bit different because I'm sure most people there were probably not tuned into other things, maybe. But again, I think the big reason why the number is what it is the schedule. The schedule is horrible. The schedule for college football, period, is horrible. I mean, we have, excuse me, a little burp there. I think we have, what is the ACC, I believe, or ACC Big 12 are airing their schedule reveal next, next Wednesday, I believe. So it's just in general, I can make a whole segment on this probably at some point in the spring and summer, but the college football schedule in general is just a total mess. Like, December's a whole mess. The schedule's a whole mess. It's weird that it's almost like after the national championship game happens, and this is just in general here, it's almost like the sport, for the most part, for the general public, just stops. It's like there goes. It goes away, and then no, won't see it again until Memorial Day. It's like wow, or Labor Day. It's like wow, like you guys don't realize that we have like transfer portal, recruiting. Looking back at certain things the past season, spring practice for some teams is actually starting in about a month, which is kind of hard to believe. But yes, this sport is a you know 365 days a year. Like the sport doesn't just fall asleep. We have media days, spring meetings, conference realignment news probably going to happen too. That's another thing that no one's talking about. More likely may happen, or has happened with Northern Illinois joining the Mountain West for some reason. But just in general, the schedule's a mess, and that is a reason why the number is so low. At least to me, that's probably the main reason why. Not to mention, it's on a day that happens to be inauguration day too. And again, a lot of folks were probably invested who are also college football fans or just casual fans were fully invested in the inauguration of a new president who, by the time the national championship comes around, are TV'd out because they're watching, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, CBS, C-SPAN, PBS, and they're just like, oh man, I've been watching, inauguration coverage all day. I'm so tired. I don't want to college football. Whatever. I may put it on, maybe not. I may fall asleep. Like that to me, sort of in some ways, probably enhanced this number being so low. Now, whether or not it wasn't inauguration day or not, probably doesn't matter. But still, I mean, that doesn't help either. And again, not to mention the schedule, having the game, having so much spacing between semifinals and championship game, and to me is just stupid. Not to mention, also it being a Monday doesn't help either. But it's another conversation that a lot of folks have had, and I completely agree that having a college football championship game, both football and basketball, on a Monday to me is stupid. Like Friday would make more sense. And again, I get it. Saturday you can't because of the NFL. The old NFL. Of course, there's no way. The Josh Pate proposal, or not the Josh Pate proposal, the Joel Klatt proposal of having like the NFL playoff games being lead into the national championship, to me actually seems pretty reasonable. But of course, that's being fantasy land, and of course, in the real world, that can't happen. The NFL would, probably give the college football playoff committee and ESPN, all of them, the middle finger saying, no, we're not doing that. But unfortunately, we can't do that. In my perfect world, I think a Friday championship would be fine. At least it would, it's the end of the week, and there's no people don't have to go to work on Saturday. At least most of us. But of course, we can't have nice things. The schedule's a mess anyway. But yeah, in all trueness, that 22.1 million number to a normal person, normal fan, that really shouldn't matter to you. You shouldn't worry about it. But as a TV exec at ESPN, Disney, Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney at the moment, of course, he's back now, or he's been back for a couple years. That should kind of worry you. And I think it should make you wonder, at least if the right people are in the room, that, having a national championship game on inauguration day and every 4 years, or just having it in general in the middle of the NFL playoffs and in, late January, and having, an entire month following, the playoff selection show, the final show, and conference championship games, maybe isn't the right idea. Or just in general, the whole sport calendar is stupid anyway. But anyway, I'm not going to go a whole tangent on that. I've already said what I needed to say on that at the moment. Who knows? I may bring this back up again at some point this spring or summer. But those are my thoughts on that. Just yeah, it's not good. I mean, again, as someone in the data analytical world, or someone who's ventured into that a little bit, it's not good numbers. But I think as a normal fan, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. At least you shouldn't be, because again, you're not a TV exec. Like those numbers, like who cares if you're a normal fan? If the numbers are that low, because it's not going to affect you necessarily. But as a TV exec, someone who covers the sport, has my own show, yeah, it does worry me a little bit. It does make me upset. I don't have no joy in saying that, but unless the calendar changes, unless there's any, actual sane people who actually care about the sport, not these, corporate, entity people, this will not change, and you will continue to see numbers in the same ballpark. Again, for a small YouTuber like me, this would be great, right? 22.1 million like subscribers or views. That's absolutely great. But in the realm of TV, that's no bueno. And again, all this, to me, at least in my opinion, I know Josh Pitt will talk about it later. We'll talk about it later tonight on his show, so I'll be interested to see what he says when he does his show later. What he thinks, because he did reveal that he will talk about it. which is interesting. Like me and him doing the same topics, even though I had this idea already beforehand. But whatever. I guess great minds think alike. But at least in my opinion, the scheduling, having it again on inauguration day, at least every 4 years, it will probably be. And not to mention it being in late January and it being on a Monday, it didn't help. So I don't have much joy in saying that. It hurts me to see those numbers coming in. But then again, if you're a normal fan, again, like I said, and we'll move on here. This doesn't matter to you. You shouldn't a 22.1 million number, like 22.1 million tuned in. That to a normal fan shouldn't matter to you, to a TV exec, to anyone at ESPN, Disney, or heck any studio or network that was airing it. Yeah, you should be concerned. So hopefully they take that into account next time the sport has to change again. That the calendar is very much so screwed up, and which is why I totally advocate for a commissioner, whether it's paid or clap. In my opinion, it doesn't matter. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts on the whole national title ratings conversation. Again, I'm sure Josh Pate, when he hops on later tonight, be interesting to see what he has to say about it. I'm sure it'll be one of his first segments. But again, at least to me, I firmly believe the schedule here, it being on a Monday, inauguration day, right in the middle of the NFL playoffs, being on a Monday. I think I already said that multiple times. But then again, I think a lot of folks don't pay attention. But that's my thoughts on it. That's the reason why I believe that number is what it is. But what can you say? Again, I have no powers to change it. Most of you don't either. But what I can do is I'm going to get some water here and we'll move on to some more happier topics, if you will. So Ohio State won the national championship, as we saw on Monday night. I just wanted to go into this a little bit, sort of the implications of this. Like, what does Ohio State winning the national title sort of mean here? Let me fix my microphone real quick here. Okay, so like, what are the implications here? What does Ohio State winning the national title? What ripple effects does that have? I think two big ones here. Both of them are kind of obvious. Maybe the one other may not be that obvious right now because you're not really thinking about it unless you're a Ohio State fan or a certain fan base. But the first one's obvious, and that this will have implications on the SEC. I think a lot of people they've already started this, and I'm not going to dive into a lot here, but the sort of implication, this sort of I don't know, like Cold War-esque battle of the SEC, Big Ten, which conference is but better? It's the old adage of my conference can be your conference, right? SEC, Big Ten, the Super Two era, or whatever people are calling it now. This will obviously have implications on the SEC. They have not won a national title in 2 years, which is for some folks in Birmingham, Alabama, is cause for concern. They are running around with, like, their heads are all cut off and they're yelling and screaming. They don't know what's going on. They're all mad. Let's just kind of call it what it is. I'm pretty sure Greg Sankey is not happy that Tony Petitti and the Big Ten have two national title trophies in their trophy case in the last 2 years. I'm sure he's not happy about that. I'm sure this will create a lot more pressure, not hot seat pressure, but competitive pressure on a number of teams. Bama, for example, if Kellen DeBoer, Kirby Smart at Georgia, Josh Heupel at Tennessee, Mike Elko even at Texas A&M. Now, a lot of folks are ignoring A&M right now. I'm not. Ditto with Bill Napier in Florida. Yes, like I said on Monday/Tuesday, Billy Napier in Florida this year with DJ Lagway. I know a lot of you guys cringe at him. A lot of you guys still think Billy Napier is an idiot. He's not. Trust me, he's not. But in general, I do think a lot of these coaches, a lot of these programs like, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas now, Oklahoma too. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure certainly to have at least have a better outing for sure. I mean, I'm fairly confident that it doesn't feel good to have, Texas in their first year make it to the semifinals and lose again. I'm sure it doesn't feel good that, Georgia losing to Notre Dame doesn't feel good. And I think, of course, this whole hatred, of course, is mostly fan driven, but it is also within the realms of like the commissioners and the, conference pride. And again, my conference, your conference and all that. And to one, I say both these conferences are good. I think the Big Ten is enjoying success from their upper level teams, like your Penn States, Michigan's in the past, one of them just a second, Ohio State, those three, and then Oregon too. Don't forget about them too. They're just, hey, um, they're very much so atop every conference. And then below them, you have your, Michigan State, getting better, hopefully. Then you have your Indianas of the world and Maryland's and Iowa's and Wisconsin's. So I guess from that perspective, again, it really is just the jealousy factor, the fact that the SEC took some blows in the postseason. I still think they are the best conference collectively, but I think in terms of the old implications here of Ohio State plus, Michigan winning it last year, makes you wonder how will the SEC respond? Will they make some changes? Will you see an influx of like certain tactics of, maybe not relying on the portal too much, maybe emphasizing keeping players in your program and not, you know, reallocating your funds. And this is something that I think Josh Pay touched on a little bit. And actually some of the guys in Cover 3 touched on too. It's the fact that with Ohio State and Michigan, I think to a certain extent last year, right, we will actually even more to an extent, represents sort of this interesting little nugget here of teams sticking together. And I think the SEC, you're seeing a lot of transfer portal heavy teams like Ole Miss, Auburn, Alabama to a certain extent, Texas to a certain extent. A lot of these teams who are moving around a lot and going in the portal and getting players, and some of that's through necessity. Like Auburn, for example, needed to go in the portal. Hugh Freeze needed to go in the portal. It's Josh B talks about all the time. It's entry point. That's via agencies talk to. It's entry point. Hugh Freeze inherited a program that was reminiscent of like a G5 team, had to come in, bring in literally new players basically, and had to bubblegum and paperclip his way to getting the team at least somewhat competitive in most games. And I may not see the results in the field just yet, but they're doing that. But that's not the only thing. That's not the only method of getting talent. Like Ohio State, Michigan kept their talent around. None of those guys went in the portal. Like none of those guys like JTT or Jack Sawyer or just anyone. You can name anyone. Mecca Ibuka. These guys, the two defensive linemen from Michigan and Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Like those guys could have gone to the portal or could have gone to the draft, but those two rival schools, mind you, Ohio State, Michigan, they use their NIL collective to not only get certain pieces in the portal, like Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs, but they also kept guys around who could have gone into the NFL, could have gone into the portal, who could have entered their name into the database. They didn't. They stuck around because there's belief there and there is a good culture there. At least culture in terms of team bonding and team chemistry. And I feel like that is something that Ohio State this year represents and what Michigan the past couple years under the old regime represented. It's that cohesiveness, the bonding, and the team chemistry, and sort of those teams evolving throughout the year. That's what that represents. And I think the SEC, you were seeing a shift, like especially of Ole Miss and Auburn, for example, the two big teams that were using the portal a lot, heavily relying on the portal, and you're seeing maybe those teams having the success they wanted, particularly Ole Miss this past season. Maybe it was the lack of cohesiveness or lack of actually emphasizing on keeping your star players around versus just going into the, going to Publix and, buying the groceries. That's not what college football is. That's not, microwaving your way to stuff. Like I mentioned, several times, like what Auburn did in 2013 under Gus Malzahn and what TCU did under Sonny Dykes his first year a couple years ago, that's not normal. Like what Ohio State's doing, what Michigan has done, and what other teams like Texas, Bama, and whatnot, and Clemson, that's the way you should be doing it, or at least Clemson in the past, or not recently. That's how you should be doing it. It's cohesiveness, buying in, keeping your players home, not necessarily relying on the portal too much. Now, there's, again, like I've been mentioning before, there is a good mixture of that. And I think, again, Ohio State represents that. Michigan represents that sort of. I think Texas, maybe to a certain extent, Georgia to a certain extent, represents the best ways of mixing recruiting high school and keeping your players around who you've brought in through high school, and also utilizing the portal to sharpen up areas that maybe you're weak at. Then you have programs like Clemson, who are the other extreme of that, at least up until recently. Florida State, the other extreme, effectively relying on the portal too much and seeing what happened this year. And you go, well, what happened to Florida State? They just went, 13 games last year, and here they are running, may as well be, take away the Seminole logo. You would imagine that's like Wake Forest or Kansas. Well, it's not. I think a lot of that probably because of the portal. You're bringing in guys who are not Seminoles at heart. They're not guys who Mike Norvell personally recruited. These are guys who are savants, bounty hunters, and use whatever term you want to use there. So I think that's one implication. I think that's something that maybe if you're in the SEC, if you're a head coach, and some of these bigger programs like Auburn, Florida, Ole Miss, maybe you do wonder, maybe we should emphasize keeping our guys around, the guys who we recruited, guys who maybe we actually got in these recruiting classes that were high level guys. Maybe we should actually pay them instead of just getting all these outsiders. Now, doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. You should do that. You should be using the tools to your advantage, but keeping your guys around is a tool. That's not that's not like something you should be ignoring either, nor the portal either. Again, there is a good mixture there that I think a lot of these teams, these programs that want to be serious about winning championships, that's at least the way I'll be doing it. It's using recruiting and also supplementing through the portal. And I think Ohio State and Michigan to a certain extent did that the past couple of years. Now the flip side to that, the other sort of ripple this could have had an effect on is Michigan. Just mentioned them. I don't think Michigan is going to sit by idly. While yes, they beat Ohio State this year and they beat Bama, and they finished the season strong. You're getting Bryce Underwood in recruiting, and everything's looking up for Sherman Moore after it looked a little scary there towards the beginning. They're not going to idly sit by and watch this happen. They're not going to sit here and watch Ohio State win a national championship and have all this, albeit though accolades and success they've earned it. But I think if you're a Michigan fan, if you're living in, I don't know, Owasso, Michigan, or Detroit, Michigan, or DeWitt, Michigan, home of Matthew Maher, MMG, you're not going to be sitting idly by and just watching Ohio State hosting the college football playoff trophy, which, by the way, not the biggest fan of, though. I'm more of a fan of it than some people, but still think that Crystal football was kind of cool. At least it was unique. At least it kind of looked kind of cool. But if you're a Michigan fan or even a coach there, Sherman Moore, you're not sitting idly by doing this year. And I think a lot of this is reflective of them getting not Dante Moore. He's at Oregon. They could have gone him, but getting Bryce Underwood from LSU, like that immediately shows you're being serious and changing out the offensive coordinator, making some changes there. I do believe in the coming years, maybe not next year to a certain extent, but maybe in the next couple years, I think this Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, while it has been one-sided, I think it's going to be very competitive in terms of both of these programs are going to be at a very interesting level. Again, very interesting to see where that looks like, and I do believe I think Michigan, how they respond to this, maybe it's changing in recruiting, or maybe making changes in strength and conditioning, maybe it's making changes in nutrition, or doing some different stuff. Again, like I mentioned, they changed offensive coordinators. I just happen to believe they will find a way to respond, and I think Michigan's going to adapt to this, and I think they will, in some ways, be back. I don't know if it's this year again with having guy Bryce Underwood, who Bud Elliott said it months ago that he is, again, in terms of skill here, not necessarily he is going to be this, but in terms of skills, the best thing we've seen since Cam Newton was roaming around Auburn's campus. I mean, that's a big hit for Michigan, and I think he is the future, and he represents, and in my opinion at least, was part of Michigan's plan here to respond. Which is crazy to say that because, again, Michigan won literally the national championship last year. Now here they are, or here we are, talking about how Michigan's going to respond. Fascinating stuff there. To say at least, again, the ripple effects of this Ohio State championship thing. This, again, the first one's obvious in Michigan, but again, I think the second one, the SEC and the way they go about things, again, how some of those programs down there, how they change some things, do we go heavily in the portal? Do we not? Do we find a better mixture? That's one I'm actually more actually fascinated about than the Michigan one. The Michigan one's obvious, but that SEC one's interesting. Like how will the SEC, how will Greg Sankey, and how will, well, I'm acting like Greg Sankey's actually playing these games. I'm just like, how will these coaches in the SEC, again, like Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart, Sark, Billy Napier, Brian Kelly too. A lot of folks throwing shit at Brian Kelly. I'm not. My opinion of him has not changed. I know some folks at certain networks feel a certain way towards him. You can think that way. I don't think that way. I think Brian Kelly's still a good coach, and I think he's still fit there. They're making changes as we speak. They're using the portal. They kept Garrett Nussmeier to come back a second year. Second year as a starter. How about that? A lot of us, for up to including me, were wondering what would they do for a quarterback, but here they are. They have Nuss is still there, and of course, next year is a little bit different. But there is changes being made. But there are other programs like Bama, Georgia, Texas, Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida, Tennessee as well. How would they adapt to this? How would they change? How would they sort of, are they going to, how will they sort of steer themselves looking at Ohio State, knowing that, as an SEC program, you can't let that stand. You can't let Michigan and Ohio State win back-to-back national titles, and you can't let Washington and Notre Dame, because I know how those folks feel in the Southeastern region. I live in the Southeast. I live in the state of Florida. I've been around a lot of those folks. I know how they feel. I know how they hate Notre Dame. I know how they hate Ohio State, Michigan, even the teams on the West Coast, the new teams like Oregon, Ohio, USC, UCLA, Washington. They hate them with a passion. And I'm sure those coaches hate them with a passion. I'm sure Greg Sankey hates them too, even though they're the two, him and Tony Petiti are the best, or the biggest and best power players in college football right now. They don't like each other. They don't. I'm pretty sure Tony Petiti, or even the folks at before him, Kevin Warren, probably didn't like seeing Alabama, Ohio, LSU, or Auburn back in 2010s hoisting national championships or making it to the national championship, or even, heck, Florida State and Clemson. Those programs down there too. Like, they're not going to sit by and idly sit by and watch Michigan, Ohio State win the national championships. No, they will respond, and we're already starting to see that again. Changes like that, what we're seeing at LSU and what Auburn's trying to do with recruiting under Hugh Freeze and getting guys in the portal. They're improving down there, and I think they know how important this is, and not just them. It's, of course, A&M part of that, Tennessee and whatnot. I'll wrap up this segment. I do think the Michigan thing is interesting, but I think what's even more interesting is the SEC aspect. How will the SEC respond to this? How will those programs sort of change their modus operandi to better match Ohio State? Maybe it is focusing more on keeping your star players around versus just, gotta go to the grocery store or the portal, gotta go shop for players. That doesn't solve all the world does not revolve around the portal, nor should you just ignore it. Again, it's all about that balance. It's finding a good mixture of portal players versus keeping your program players and recruited players around. Ohio State did it, Michigan did it, and they got success out of it. You didn't. Now, that's not a knock on anyone. I'm not here saying I'm smarter than, Hugh Freeze, Josh Heupel, Lane Kiffin, Kevin DeBoer. But just from a generic standpoint, I'm really interested to see how a lot of these big programs in the SEC, how will they respond, and how will their sort of modus operandi evolve a little bit, not change fully, but just evolve a little bit. We're seeing it at LSU. We're seeing it at Auburn. Will Kevin DeBoer do that? Will we see Georgia make some changes? Will we see some, evolution, if you will, to keep ahead of the Big Ten and some of those other programs that have the last two national championships? But then again, I'm not making it sound like the SEC is a slouch here, but be interesting to see how they respond. And of course, the Michigan angle is fascinating too. Again, we're already starting to see that with, Bryce Underwood coming in and some of the changes that Stromore is making. 1 year, year one, the year two jump. I think Bryce Underwood is the key to all this, and sort of the changes that Stromore is making behind the scenes there, particularly starting with the OC change, which was needed, to say the least. But yeah, the implications here of Ohio State winning it all isn't just affecting the folks in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's affecting a lot of people. Also up into impacting the Big 12 and the ACC, like I just mentioned. Some of those teams in the southern region will not stand for this. What will Florida State do? Mike Norvell. What will Clemson do with Dabo Swinney? They're making changes. We're seeing that. We haven't seen the results yet, like I've been mentioning. About Mike Norvell. He hired Gus Malzahn. He hired Tony White from Nebraska, good defensive coordinator. Will we see the results of that this year? Will we actually see positive things from them? Will we see the Big 12 elevate a little bit? They're a fascinating one, too. Will any teams over there step up besides Arizona State? Iowa State's been there. I think Texas Tech's team that's rising. That's another team I could have mentioned on Monday, a fascinating team. That's just, Drew McGuire. Hey, don't forget about us. We were in conversations for the Big 12. Kansas State too. Hello. They're out there too. At least I hear about them. I know the NFL types don't. They're just Kansas State. Bleh. Couldn't care about them. I do. But get some water real quick. And then speaking of Kansas State, we will touch on them, the predictions versus reality segment. So I have a lot of show left here. Hopefully the voice will make it. By the way, I should should have done this already. I'm gonna check and see if our audio is actually working here. Usually I do it a little bit earlier, but I don't know. I was just ready to go, if you will. If you will, let me let's see if we can play the audio here on the second screen here, if it'll work. By the way, okay, so audio is working. So back in the summer, moving on here, back in the summer, we did predictions, if you will. Not really predictions, but just like best case scenario, worst case scenario, reasonable scenario. If you were, recall, very first episode we did Oregon. I believe Kansas State too. We did actually did a lot of these. Actually, we used to. We'll do this again. Now, obviously, we'll have more time here because we didn't. We started the show in June. By the way, we'll be starting our projections for this year. Projections for this year's season starting in May. So May 1st, we will do the majority of all 134-ish, 129-ish teams throughout the summer and late spring, technically, even though, in my opinion, summer kind of begins May 1st. But around the 1st of May, first week of May, or close to that, we will begin those projections instead of having to cram those in. I think we're doing 4 of them in one show, half insane. That's half the show. But we're not doing that this year. A little bit different strategy here. This will be the method, by the way, going forward. But I figured in between now and then we may do this a little bit, not for all of the teams, maybe the majority of them. Okay, predictions versus reality. So based on our projections, this is the most reasonable projection. Also using this as an excuse to look back as well. Past season, sort of like a season recap. We'll probably do this until mid-February, so it won't be too long. But we're actually probably around when most of you do start spring ball. So it'll be a few weeks of us doing this intermittently, or probably every single show, but at least going forward for a little bit. Looking at predictions versus reality. So what we projected in the summer versus what you end up getting, sort of a season, recap, if you will. So first up here, Oregon, great season. We projected here, and I were doc open here. So our best case scenario was 11-1. Worst case scenario was 9-3. Our most reasonable was 10-2. So as you can see here, that was sort of in line with the Vegas win total. I don't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure it was 10 or 11, I believe, which is pretty high. Considering Oregon was a newcomer in the Big Ten, but Grant Shooter uber talented. So the actual record for them was 13-1. So not totally off. Though we projected them to lose twice. But just in general here, just to recap, a great season for Oregon. I know a lot of folks, it kind of gets buried with Ohio State winning it all, and technically Ohio State beat every single team in their schedule. Though I'm pretty sure those schedule shirts, that the commemorative schedule shirts, will say otherwise. But anyway, at least for for Oregon, correction. For Oregon, they technically did beat every single team in their schedule, technically. Though history will remember you losing your Rose Bowl game to them. But that was a terrific season for them. And I think, again, like I've been said even after the game finished, the Rose Bowl, I am very intrigued with what Dan Lanning's building up there. If you look at what Dan Lanning, what he's doing out there, what he's been able to accomplish as a 38-year-old, by the way, not even 40 yet. 10-3 his first year. Again, remember that first year, they lost to Georgia, 49-3? Well, everyone was saying, oh, Dan Lanning's stupid, he's going to get fired, and this and that, and he's an idiot. Even back then, privately, before I had a show, I was like, "Oh, hold on a minute. Let's give him a break here. It's his first game. I wasn't acting. I wasn't, calling for anyone's jobs. I don't do that. By the way, I don't sit here and yell and scream for anyone to get fired. So I personally, before we did our show, I was like, I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna let this evolve. Let's just see what happens. Turns out they go 10-3 his first year. Um, Now again, like I mentioned earlier about the whole microwave thing, Oregon going 10-3 their first year under Dane Lanning is not the same thing as like Sonny Dykes or Gus Malzahn. This was tough for them. This wasn't, the instant success. This was tough for them. I mean, again, I look at their schedule in 2022. Losing to Georgia 49-3. Gross. Losing to Washington. Killing the Boars first season there, I believe. Yeah, first season. Losing to Oregon State. Jonathan Smith and company. And that's tough. That's not, wasn't necessarily the way you wanted when the season to end. But I think it was good for that program to experience that because it helps build character. I think a lot of programs will tell you, a lot of coaches I think will tell you, struggling early helps you build character for when you end up rising and having success. Kirby will tell you that his first year, Kirby almost lost to an FCS team. Like that's, ugh. I remember watching that game against Nichols. Ugh, ugh. Um, Nick Saban losing to Louisiana Monroe, Sark losing to Kansas and Iowa State, just awful losses, and losing to Arkansas in the playoff fashion in his second game. Like those are the humble beginnings for those coaches. Now see where they're at. Sark 13 wins this year, last year 12 wins. Kirby 2 national titles. Nick Saban, greatest head coach at least in my lifetime, or best head coach in my lifetime. I wasn't around for Bear Bryant. I know people in my family were, but like what was I saying? Yeah, so Dan Lanning in his first year, yeah, it may look good, but it was a struggle. It was, the trials and tribulations. Again, losing 49-3, that's humbling. Not alone, let alone going against your former your former employer who you left, and now you're head coaching against him in your first game, and it's like, well, I wasn't sitting here laughing at him. I kind of felt sorry for them, but no one should feel sorry for them because it's tough. But year two, jumping in on year three, you go 13-1, and yeah, again, you didn't have the year you wanted necessarily, but based on how they've been recruiting and how Dan Lanning's been able to keep that staff together. Will Stein, by the way, the coordinator for them the past couple of years, he's back again. I think eventually he will get a high level coaching job at some point, coming soon to a theater near you. I just I just wonder going forward here how exciting this will be if you're an Oregon fan. If you're living in Corvallis, well, not Corvallis, but Eugene, Oregon, Portland, in any of those areas, not named Corvallis, you should be very excited, and you should be, you know, excited. You should be amped up. You should be hyped. For Oregon football could be again. They're recruiting off the rails right now. And that's like even better than what Mario was doing. Even better than what Chip Kelly was doing when he was up there. Like, they were not recruiting this way. They were not recruiting like the top 5-ish level. Now, this is insane what they're doing up there. And the town they're getting in, both using the portal and in just normal high school recruiting, which is the all important, which is paramount. Um, if I'm an Oregon fan, I'm very excited for what the next years will look like, and I think eventually, much like Sark, you will eventually begin to see Oregon making slow success. May not necessarily mean to win the national championship next year, but in the next few years, I think they will win one. I think they will. I'm not writing it in pen. I'm writing it in pencil, but it's fascinating, man, to see how far Oregon has come under Dan Lanning from losing 49-3 to where they are now. And look, my projection was a little bit off, but something in the ballpark, right? I mean, 10-2, 13-1, 11-1, one loss. Like was sort of our realm there. And I think we sort of got that correct a little bit, but was off a little bit too, to a certain extent. Did not imagine them beating Ohio State, at least at that point. But 13-1 is pretty damn good in your third year, and we still don't know who Dan Lanning is as a coach. Do you know who Dan Lanning is as a coach? I still don't know. It's still a mystery. We don't know. He's only been doing this for 3 years. He literally got there like an hour ago. Feels like, and still a bit of a mystery to see what this team will look like and what success could come. That's kind of the mystery here. We know how talented they are. It's just the mystery is whether or not we will still be reaping instant success in the next couple of years, or will it take a little bit more. But I do believe, unless this thing just ultimately just collapses, they will have success. A lot of it. I don't know what I just said there, but I think you guys get the understanding there. Very excited what the future of Oregon football is. So again, our reasonable projection for them was 10-2. Reality was 13-1, so off, but was in the ballpark though. I thought Oregon even a 10-2 playoff team for sure. Kansas State. You guys remember them? I was high on them. Not literally high, but high on them. I was excited about them. Avery Johnson, huge fan of his. I thought he was going to be a good player for them. I think he still is. Chris Kleiman, great coach. He's had a lot of success there, taking over for Bill Snyder. Almost that stuff he hasn't, like Bill Snyder didn't leave. It's almost kind of like if you didn't even, like if you knew Bill Snyder was the coach, and you like fast forward, if you were like maybe your future self, travel back to like, I don't know, 2014 and said, hey, I'm from 2024. Kansas State is 9-3 this year. Last year, I think they're like 8-5. Won the Big 12 the year before that. Who do you think's the coach? You probably be like, oh yeah, probably Bill Snyder, right? Maybe he's still around. Well, it's not. It's Chris Kleiman, the guy who at that point in 2014 was still coaching in Fargo, North Dakota. And here is Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. Um, Again, I was very, very excited about this team. I thought they could have been a good team, 9-win team, maybe even a playoff team if they won the Big 12. So our best case scenario for them was actually 10-2. Worst case 8-4, reasonable 9-3, which is actually kind of in line with what they ended up doing, sort of. At least not in the regular season, they went 8-4. So actually, our worst case scenario actually hit. So I actually take that back. Our worst case scenario actually hit, which is actually good. Like 8-4 is not nothing to sneeze at, although it's not what you probably wanted at the beginning of the year or what you thought you're going to get. But 8-4 was our regular season best case. Worst case that actually hit. Now our reasonable was actually 9-3. So yeah, technically on a technicality that didn't actually hit, but our reasonable was off. We were off just a little bit, but our worst case did hit though. Was 8-4. Started out good, struggled against Tulane. Tulane John Sermon, that's a good team. I have no problem with you winning that game, even if it's close. Arizona State turned out to not be a very good team. Some concern there a little bit. That was a non-conference game. Oklahoma State, losing to BYU. Well, BYU ended up being a little bit better than we thought. They thought they were going to be. That's including power ratings, but we're not talking about power ratings right now. Lost to Houston. Hey, at least what's his name? Willie Fritz. Yeah, that's Houston's head coach. I forgot his name. I should know who he is. Willie Fritz. Got his big fist. Well, yeah, he definitely shoved his fist in Kansas State because they won that game. First big win there for Willie Fritz in Houston. Arizona State, your future Big 12 champions. No shame there. Iowa State, ditto. So you actually lost one of your toughest games. BYU, I didn't really think was going to happen, so that surprised me. Houston, I guess from preseason me versus in season me, yeah, a bit of a surprise. And during the season me, nah. Arizona State, yeah, in season me would have been like, yeah, I guess that could obviously see that happening. Me in the summer, probably not. But I think for Kansas State, we look forward a little bit here in the future. Yes, Avery Johnson struggled a little bit. There was, a lot of folks sort of questioning Matt Wells. I don't think Matt Wells is that dumb as a coordinator. I think year 2 under him and Avery Johnson, I think you will see some improvement. Their schedule, by the way, is a little more tougher. So they play Iowa State, the rivalry game, Farmageddon. Not in the United States, it's in Ireland. Shameful. And week 0, just depressing, but whatever. Like Josh Pate said, I'm sure all of us will be desperate enough for real college football, not the video game, but real enough college football that we probably won't care. But in general, I'm not a big fan of these stupid neutral site games, although it's in a different country. But I know it's all for the money. It's all for brand exposure and all that. But so Farmageddon, unfortunately, is being played in Dublin, Ireland. North FCS, Army, Arizona, technically conference opponent, but not really. It's actually still a non-con because they're treating it like they're Arizona's still in the Pac-12 because that's when the game was scheduled. But their actual Big 12 conference games, at least the ones that are going to count, Colorado, TCU could be a sneaky team. Texas Tech, of course. UCF at Baylor, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Utah, So somewhat tough, somewhat hard. Definitely some tough games here at Utah. Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, probably your toughest official conference games. Iowa State too, and to include that. So next year should be interesting. We'll see what they look like in spring practice. I'm sure between now and then, when we do the actual segment for the best case, worst case, most reasonable, I'm sure by the time we have all the information available to us, we'll have a someone have a better grasp on things. I'm not sure. Is our audio still working here? I don't know. It may have actually went out. Yeah, our audio may have actually went out here. Hold on just a second here. Let me turn this on real quick. Well, okay, so you guys can still hear me. So that's strange. But my the software here is at least the app I'm using on my computer is indicating it's a lot lower, I guess. But I don't know. I guess you guys can still hear me. So whatever. Um, Walker positive. But yeah, Kansas State. Sort of, I guess we'll wrap this up real quickly. We predicted you guys to go 9-3, went 9-4 total win total here, but our worst case actually hit, which was 8-4. So how about that? A little quick of Marvel news here, then we'll move on to a Buccaneers story, then we'll wrap up the show here. Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, in an article, I believe it was with Entertainment Weekly or Variety, or one of those two trades, um, made an interesting little comment here mentioning that his character, Doctor Strange, um, is not going to be appearing in Doomsday, Avengers Doomsday, which is, by the way, again, shooting very soon. I believe I would probably assume sometime in March, so we'll be fairly soon. You're starting to imagine we're going to be getting actual set photo leaks probably coming out here very soon. So he revealed, Cumberbatch revealed, Doctor Strange will not be appearing in Doomsday. Is that real? I know a lot of folks are asking that. I think the notion out there. Now, for me personally, I don't. Again, remember dealing with the big, movie franchise thing. You always have to kind of be careful. Again, a lot of it's, the legal stuff. You don't want to get in trouble for PR people, but at least on the surface, it seems like this is legit. Like, we can probably not even name the movie. Maybe asking the question, well, why is that the case? I thought if there were some of these invasions and all the leaks and stuff, that wasn't supposed to be in, the original King Dynasty movie, and now it's contains Doomsday. It was supposed to be a part of that. Like, Doctor Strange was supposed to be a big part of the whole, King, and I guess, slash Doctor Doom, what changed? I kind of feel like with this pivot, I don't think it was ever a guarantee that Doctor Doom being involved was going to keep a lot of the old King Dynasty, I guess, lineup, if you will, intact. Like, it wasn't a guarantee you were going to get, Stephen Strange still being involved, sort of continuing that storyline I was left off of Multiverse of Madness, him and Clea going into Dark Dimension. That wasn't a guarantee to continue. Now, the original leaks and rumors suggested that in the King Dynasty version of the next Avengers movie, he was going to play big role. Him and King were going to have this like big philosophical, battle, if you will, of how they do the multiverse and stuff, and how Stephen was going to be viewed as the villain, and King was going to make himself seem like a hero and whatnot. At least the council would. So that was the original plan. Now if the plan's changing, then bringing Doctor Doom and RDJ coming back, this whole new sort of course correction that Marvel is doing, what the Russo brothers are doing with the script, with the structure of the movie. This is interesting. So, because I do believe that's the reason why. I do believe this new sort of restructuring the script of the script, the storyline, and what the Russos are doing. It kind of makes me wonder, what if they actually think, hey, we may not even need some of the original elements from the original, Michael Waldron, or I don't know if it was him, or some other writer. I think the guy who did Continuity. He got fired from the actually, but I wonder if this does signal maybe they actually feel more confident to where they don't actually need to rely on that generalized, Doctor Strange. Excuse me, they focus on their story. Maybe doesn't. Maybe they. Excuse me, pick up there. Maybe they don't feel like he needs to be the central figure of the story anymore. They are pivoting to like they did or maybe they're centering more on like Doctor Doom. There's other rumors too of like Elizabeth Olsen coming back as one of Maximoff. Maybe they are doing the love story from the comics for Doctor Doom. Like maybe they are moving some stuff around. Maybe they're prioritizing different characters. That stuff I don't know if that's the case necessarily. I'm at least speculating that could be it. maybe they are. Maybe we'll still changing the stories, actually evolving even more past the original idea of having Doctor Strange being involved. Of course, there's been a lot of rumors about Doctor Strange 3 and where that's taking place. I think the general consensus probably after the reboot, which again, by the way, that's not new news, that's old news. That's been around for about a year now. That there was rumors of a reboot coming after Secret Wars. That's going to be happening. So people are wondering that maybe that Doctor Strange movie, Doctor Strange 3, whatever it's going to be called, will probably be saved until after, probably dealing with the mutants, as the mutant saga, probably the next saga after the multiverse. So there's a lot of speculation here, but just to make this, I say all that to say, I do believe that a lot of the script changes that, the Russo brothers are making, or at least them and their team of writers, I do believe that's the reason why. There's been a lot of script changes, again, changes with the Doctor Doom, King. I think we'll have to take some more, more focusing on Doctor Doom, and maybe you're bringing in, some elements of like, Scarlet Witch being involved, maybe some like Fantastic Four probably definitely being involved because it is like a Fantastic Four villain, Doctor Doom. That makes me wonder maybe they're focusing or shifting focus to those characters and letting Steven sort of being out on his own. Maybe he shows up and definitely will probably show up in Wars and will obviously have a bigger role. At least I believe, based on the leaks and rumors going around, that he will have a role going forward. I think they're gonna ultimately recast Kermax. I think Kermax is probably locked in for a while. Reboot probably gonna be happening. But yeah, Doctor Strange on Doomsday. It's a change. It definitely makes you do things a bit differently, but I think you do a thing about it. Changing it from Kang, going Doctor Doom, probably shifting focus from it being a Strange versus Kang storyline to, Doctor Doom versus the newer Avengers. Again, some clarification, Doctor Strange is technically not really part of the new Avengers, but the current roster of the Avengers, so be like, Sam Wilson, Captain America, all these other, new characters, versus Doctor Doom along with like the Fantastic Four, maybe involving some of the rumored Scarlet Witch love story stuff. That is in the comics, by the way, so we'll see. We'll see if that is actually the case here, but personally, I do believe this is probably real. I think he is still here. I think a lot of the script changes could have dictated this change, but then again, we've seen these actors and whatnot playing coy a little bit. Maybe they've done some lying for good reasons. Andrew Garfield a couple years ago saying, "Oh, I'm not in Spider-Man, new Spider-Man movie," then he is in it. So we'll see. But if it is true, it wouldn't surprise me, and it would definitely indicate a heavy story overhaul, creative overhaul from Kang over to Doctor Doom. Maybe pivoting to, let's say, focusing on more of like the official new Avengers, and maybe focusing more on like the Fantastic Four interacting with Doctor Doom a little bit more. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. I wasn't to touch on the Star Wars news with Ryan Gosling apparently joining Sean Lee new movie, his own movie. I will touch on that next week. I still don't know what that's all about, or what that's all about. But we need some more water. I'm gonna figure out. We'll figure just with this audio, not audio issue, but just an issue with the program I'm using. Yeah, interesting here. It's not. I'm still. If you guys can still hear me, I'm pretty sure. Let me go double check here. If you listen to this on the playback on the old podcast feed, then maybe this doesn't matter, but I'm pretty sure. That's a little bit famous. Um, so I guess you guys can barely hear me. So I think what I'm going to do is we've been going for well over an hour. We're actually going to save the Liam Cohen news. I think there's some new. If you guys can still hear me, I guess you kind of can. I'm going to, yeah, we're just going to wrap up the show. I'm moving the Liam Cohen segment to next week, and we'll fix this out a little bit. I guess, yeah, you guys can really hear me. That's weird. Oh, no, I guess even the audio version I'm picking up. So, yeah, so I guess we're just going to wrap up the show here. If you guys can still hear me, then I guess whatever. But until Tuesday, if you guys can still hear me, after the rest of the weekend, I guess enjoy the college, NFL playoff games. There's a lot of them going on this weekend. But yeah, guys, apologies for the audio issues here. here. But until next Tuesday, have a great rest of the weekend. Take care, and I guess we'll see you guys on Tuesday.